Happy Friday. Happy Friday the 13th, everybody. Welcome to Agencies Talk. This is Digital Marketer's weekly talk show where we sit down with agency professionals. Today, we're happy to be talking with Ben Albert. Ben is the owner of, is it Balbert Marketing LLC?
Both work.
I like Balbert.
Both Balbert. He is also the curator of the Real Business Connections Network, where he hosts 5 podcasts. Once an underdog, now a successful entrepreneur, Ben is passionate about helping other underdogs achieve their dreams. Ben is on a mission to actually move the needle on 1 million lives, one conversation at a time. Today's topic centers around the question, are you desperate to get your message out? Ben will be sharing strategies on how you can position yourself as a thought leader in your niche. As a reminder, if you're able to, please turn on your camera so we can see your smiling faces. As always, have fun and engage in the chat. If you have any questions, please put those in the Q&A tool at the bottom so we can make sure to get those answered for you. As always, we're joined by Mark de Grasse, president of DigitalMarketer and host for today's Agencies Talk. So without further ado, Mark, please take it away.
All right. Welcome, everyone, especially you, Mateo. We're getting started today. We're going to launch into some discussion about being a thought leader, getting your message out, finding your purpose, and then possibly some podcasting, I'm guessing. Ben is actually one of our newest faculty members. We're going to be kind of talking about our faculty a lot more because they're going to be driving a lot of the new content that we're creating, our programs, workshops, live boot camps, all that kind of fun stuff. So, Ben, welcome to the show, and I'm very excited to discuss with you everything that people like us can do to get the message out and help people as much as possible with their businesses and hopefully their lives in general.
Let's go. I'm excited to be here. This is an honor. I'm excited to be with everybody here and at home watching the restream.
Well, and I especially love, because I remember your story about kind of how you started and kind of focused on the podcast and getting the words out. And I think it's an excellent story because I think a lot of marketers struggle with that, with self-promotion. And anybody who's kind of an introvert doesn't really like to do it. You know, I always tell people that I'm an introvert and not just like a small introvert. I'm one of those introverts where like you could lock me into like a cave in the ground and be totally alone forever. And I'd probably be fine. But that's the level that a lot of people don't realize that marketers can be and very, visible people can be. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think everybody should, because I think introverts especially could be very contemplative and have thought about a lot of things that they just don't talk about with anybody, but it could help everybody. So I'm hoping today you could shed some light on how to get into that path of both finding your purpose and getting the message out, because it's not an easy thing to do. So let's start with what can marketers do these days that could help, help them to start to become a thought leader in their respective segments?
Whew, so many things. We're going to have to write like a 20-article series on just this, Mark. But there's a term that I like to call creation-driven connecting. It's the real CDC, not the other one we're talking about, but creation-driven connecting. And the concept here is, especially if you're an introvert, but any marketer out there, is if you're going to be networking, and at the end of the day, it's touch points. Like if you're shaking more hands, if you're meeting more people, if you're creating more content, you have more touch points, you're going to make more money for yourself and your company. But let's say you're out there networking, you're doing some business development, you're doing some traditional face-to-face, some Zoom networking. It can be awkward. Introverted or not, everybody's been to a pitch battle and everybody's just waiting for their turn to talk at a pitch battle. So I like to lean into what I call creation-driven connecting, where the sole purpose of the real CDC, the sole purpose of connection is to create something together. The conversation is based around a mutual value set that's going to create a win-win-win circumstance. A win for you, a win for your co-creator, and then the win for the audience you get to serve. So there's lots of examples. I just happen to do it in podcasting. We just happen to be doing it right now, Mark. But let's just you and I as an example. As we create something together, all we did is invite people to the conversation and click record. I would have had this conversation with you offline regardless. And If you're introverted and you like to go deep with someone, even better. Find other people that want to go deep together. And it doesn't have to be a podcast. It doesn't have to be a video series. It could be a blog. It could be as simple as just clicking reshare, sharing someone's post, and adding an additional insight that wasn't additionally in that post. So if we use creation as the driving force within our connecting, it doesn't feel icky, it doesn't feel forced, and it creates win-win-win scenarios for everyone that gets to be involved.
Oh man, I love that, because I think we've all, especially if you've done marketing over the last 10 years, is if the message that you have isn't getting out to 10 million people, 1 billion people, then the message isn't worth it, or it's not worth making the effort. Combined with the fact that I think a lot of things that we've been told to do are like automated. You don't need to write your book, put in this code into ChatGPT and your book is written, or hire this agency and your book is written. And I've always been repulsed by that, not because I don't think that writing books or hiring somebody to write a book is a bad thing. I just don't think it illustrates anything about the author. It doesn't say their beliefs, doesn't have anything to do. It's just a tool. And I think, looking at content as a tool for marketing rather than maybe the point of marketing, or what marketing should be, which is this co-creation that you're talking about, has led us down the path of shallow, boring, useless content that we've all been kind of exposed to, which has then led us towards going the genuine side, which is why I think TikTok and things that are less produced and are really just people talking about whatever that they're feeling at the time is way more effective. So is that kind of the transition that you're seeing as well?
Absolutely. And I might piss some people off right now, but just yesterday, Gary Vee posted another classic Gary Vee post where he said, you need to be posting 77 to 25 pieces of content per day. If you want omnipresence, if you want to be successful, you need to be posting 7 to 25 pieces of content. Okay, well, not every agency is digitalmarketer.com. And at the end of the day, like, what are you trying to accomplish here? Is the content good? Was it, not saying AI is bad, I love AI, but was it sloppily done through AI with no personality, no value set, no true voice to it? Like, there's a concept that more is more is more is more. And I don't disagree that more actually equals more. However, if you're building creative relationships with possible partners, possible prospects, and referral partners, and you have a high ticket, high value program, creating less content in some scenarios, but higher value content with co-collaborators will actually reach towards higher income, when a lot of that 25 posts a day, you're just kind of getting vanity metrics, but it doesn't actually lead to sales in a lot of scenarios. I want to kind of step back and say it's case by case dependent. But in my case, I'm high ticket and it's relationship based, and less is more in scenarios oftentimes.
Well, and I think the real benefit that's going to come from that is the fact that we're transitioning into a time when I think customer acquisition is going to get very expensive. Paid media is going to get very expensive. And so unless you focus on this kind of long-term marketing approach, which I think is what you're describing, you're going to be stuck with, every single customer is more expensive than the last customer. And I think companies are starting to realize this, but at the same time, you have paid media marketers that are then trying to apply that same methodology to content and to these other types of marketing. And that's leading to like, oh yeah, post 70 times a day. Statistically, if you get, 50 impressions on 70 posts, you're getting, this volume, and then that'll lead to the metrics that you really want, which is the conversions and the leads. And then you could nurture them through whatever process. But I think you're right. I think and I've never said that before, by the way, because I was on the massive content creation side. But what I think I realized was, if you focus a lot of attention on your long form content, your big podcasts, your articles, your long form video, that could lead to your 70 pieces a day in short order, because you'll just splinter that good content out and then you'll share it all the different places in a million. What do we call tweets now? Is it X's?
X.
Like Xing? X's?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. It's odd, but Elon is doing something right, so I can't Can't criticize him too much.
No, well, he's a genuine guy who's a big nerd who does sporadic, seemingly random actions, which is actually way more human than people realize. Because I think that we all think, especially as marketers, that we have to have this plan and we know what we're doing and we're using the experimental method to A/B test, blah, 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 rather than just saying like, I felt like it. That's the explanation, and I don't think that's a bad explanation when it comes to content creation.
And we can get existential. We don't have to, but that's a really good point that if you're creating something and it makes you want to puke, it's nauseating, possibly you're in the wrong space or you're creating the wrong thing. And sometimes the thing that actually gets less momentum is the thing that brings you a lot of joy. And again, we're getting existential, but if you hate your job, there's a problem.
I 100% agree with that, because I think that's at the end of the day, your job is the thing that you're doing with the majority of the time you have and the majority of the energy that you have. And so if you're spending all your time and energy on the thing that you hate, which a lot of people do, we all have, I always talk about all the movies and TV shows that we talk bashing office life, where it's like, office space, look at this is shallow, cogs in the machine, and it's so pointless. And then everybody shows up to work on Monday and you're like, okay, well, if you really believe this, then what the heck are you doing right now? Which is, a whole different discussion. I think we are going a little existential, but in terms of good content creation, unless you go to this level of depth, then what you're doing is you're looking up a list of likely keywords that your target market might search, and then you're plugging it into whatever machine and you're spitting out content and you're putting out the content. It's just this boring cycle that we've kind of got stuck in. And so I think your approach, especially with the relationship side, which is really, if we're being honest, AI could do all the boring cog in the machine crap. That's
going to make all that easier. It's going to make it easier for someone who's relationship driven.
Well, the only thing left is going to be relationship driven and innovative, genuine content. And that's all we're going to have left as humans, which is good because we suck at the other stuff. Problem solved, right? Let's talk about the relationships. How do you start the process? You're an introvert. You don't have a big business network or professional network. How can you kind of, get in the door in terms of getting out there and starting to do this kind of co-creation concept?
Yeah, and we'll step way back because we're talking about thought leadership as well, and we almost dived so deep into the how quickly, and there's no thought leadership without relationships, because you need to have thoughts. A lot of people have those. You also need to be a leader, and if you're not leading anyone, you're not a thought leader. You're just writing thoughts. So it's a combination of the both. It's I have great thoughts, but I have people that are listening and care about what I have to say. I'm a leader. I'm a thought leader. There's relationships. But to step way back, one of my favorite analogies is think about Tom. Do you remember, Tom from MySpace? Mm-hmm. That grainy photo of him in front of like a whiteboard or something. When you signed up for MySpace way back in the day, who was your first friend?
Your actual friend?
Your first friend was
Tom.
My second friend was like the person that told me to set up MySpace. And then my third friend was one who knew HTML. So I loved that MySpace was so customizable. But your first friend was Tom. And the reason Tom was your first friend is because he co-founded the platform. So I give this example to kind of illustrate, if you want a seat at the table, sometimes you just need to bring your own table. If you want an opportunity on the mic, why don't you just bring the mic? If you want to speak in an event and you feel like you can't get, and everyone's turning you down, you don't get the seat at the table, you don't get the time on the mic, maybe you run your own event. And what you do is maybe you charge tickets and then you actually pay someone to come in, be a keynote speaker, this and that, give out awards. If you really want to kind of become a thought leader overnight, just host an event, give out awards. People will show up because they love to accept an award. And now you have an event and you're a thought leader in your space. Boom, just like that. Now, it's not that simple, but why was Tom our first friend? Because he invented the platform. So the question is, what can you invent? And it doesn't have to be the next Facebook, the next MySpace. It doesn't have to be the next big SaaS billion-dollar product. It can be a blog. It can be a podcast. It can be a photo series on an Instagram account. It could be anything that you're passionate about and good at as a marketer, but you ask yourself the question, what is the topic? What would I like to invent? And who are my co-collaborators to make this a thing? Then you position yourself as a thought leader simply in the fact that you own the platform, you bring people on board, and then if you're really smart, you get endorsements and testimonials from those co-collaborators. So you bring peers on, they see what it's like to work with you, they endorse the fact that you're a stand-up guy or gal, and then you can use that endorsement. But more than anything, they know what it feels like and looks like to work with you professionally. Don't you think there's a higher probability they'll recommend you and be a cheerleader for your product, your leadership, whatever you're trying to push? And that's my opinion on thought leadership. And I started from zero after getting furloughed from a sales executive role and started a rinky-dink Rochester, New York-based podcast. And believe it or not, I was the biggest Rochester-based podcast quickly because I was dealing with a very small niche. But like, I'm not cut from a different cloth. I started from zero and just did a couple things, and it leads to greater success.
Oh man. Well, the only thing I'll disagree on is that you're not cut from a different cloth, because having those kind of realizations and taking that step is actually super brave. It's something a lot of people aren't willing to do or don't think they're capable of. So with that said, I completely agree. And it's, and there are real world examples of the biggest success that you could think of. And I hate Hollywood, but if you look at the stars, especially the comedians, if you think about it, like why does it seem like there's certain groups of men and women who seem to make it in Hollywood, and they're always coming out with movies and they're always doing these things? And it's exactly what you're talking about, because the industry itself is so exclusive and incestuous that the only way that you can actually break into that space is by creating your own content. And so Jonah Hill and that whole crew started together, and then they started making all their stuff together, and then they got it out there, and then they were able to get into the market. And so I think as much as I don't like Hollywood, that's a good case study that exemplifies exactly what you're talking about. If you can't get in, then make your own. And that's way easier, and you have way more control, and at the end of the day it's way more fun, because you get to find this network and these friends and these colleagues and other professionals that now you have a relationship with, and now you could all grow together. Everybody wins, and the audience just gets to watch this interaction and be involved as much as they want to be, and join the group. It's always like, everybody's always like, oh, how do I get on your podcast? And I'm like, here's the link. Like, do you want to? That's great. Yeah, let's talk. What do you want to talk about? It's not it doesn't have to be this big official process. And you have levels, and that's kind of what we did. And that's why I mentioned the fact that you're faculty now, because you didn't start as faculty. I wasn't like, hey, Ben, you really need new faculty members, and we want a specialist that does podcasting and understands relationship marketing. Could you please be on the faculty? It was a long process. I think we had that first podcast that you were on, I have no idea how long ago.
A little bit ago, you were on my show. And it was probably earlier this year. It was definitely this year. You were on my show this year as well. But can I tell you something with love?
Sure.
I had no intention to be faculty. I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to reach out to Mark and see if I can become his faculty. I was doing cool stuff. You were doing cool stuff. Your team's doing incredible stuff. Everyone at DigitalMarketer. And it just made sense that eventually I joined the faculty, but there was no end in mind that my goal is to be a digital marketer faculty. I was just out there doing pretty cool things. You were doing cool things, and we got along.
Yeah. And that's all it took. And that's all it should take, because I think any kind of relationship that you're forcing, or that you have an ulterior motive, like, and as much as you people like that, and I don't hate these people, but when you see somebody who you could tell that's their motivation is to somehow profit from this relationship, it does feel gross. It feels like, okay, so I'm the tool for your success. Like, I don't want to be that. Who wants to be that? I'll help, we could be buddies and figure it out. But if you're not going to be honest about what your intention is, it's not hidden to everybody. Like, we all become aware of it. And then a lot of times you get upset with it, which is not helpful for building that kind of genuine network that you're talking about and organically leading to, something that could be profitable and beneficial for both parties. So I think that's, be real. And if you can't tell what's real, then you need to do some self-development and figure it out.
At least start with what's real to you, right?
Yeah.
It's again, win means everybody wins. You're winning, they're winning, but so is the audience. And, a lot of people make a lot of money on transactional relationships, but the top of the top, the people that make the greatest impact, they're givers. And maybe, again, this is my philosophy, but I think the people at the highest level, they're giving way more in value than they ever asked for out of that transaction.
Well, and that ends up being the purpose. The purpose is to give. And if your purpose is not to give, then, what's the other side? To take. Nobody likes takers. That's not not something anybody really aspires to be. But I think people unintentionally make that their purpose. And again, it's not unknown to everybody around you. So, I think being aware and just getting out there and finding out, what you actually want to achieve is a good space. But with that said, and all this stuff is very broad.
Yeah.
How do you come up with that niche? Because I know one of the things that you mentioned is when you found your podcast, you instantly became, the biggest podcaster in your niche. But how did you find that niche in the first place?
That's a tough question that a niche specialist would be even better at answering. I can give you my version.
Do it.
My version is I had started a podcast in 2016. It was a music podcast. The pandemic had hit. I was a sales executive for a marketing firm, so I understood marketing. But I lost my job. I lost my book of business. All of that went bye-bye. So I understand marketing. I understand podcasting. Music Ben is late nights, doesn't make any money, but gets into places for free. Business Ben wants to build something bigger than himself. So I had to put Music Ben aside, reinvent, create Business Ben, who, again, loves marketing, loves podcasting, born and raised in Rochester, New York. Rochester, New York business podcast. Do a little market research, see that it doesn't exist. Use your brain a little bit. A business owner in your hometown. Now, you can't even meet in person because it's a pandemic, but there's still proximity. Business owner in your hometown is the highest probability of being a client. If you want to think transactions, highest probability of being a client, it's true, but also the highest probability of being a mentor and a peer. So my thing was just stacking what I was good at. Rochester, New York podcaster who knows marketing. Let's do a Rochester, New York business podcast and talk to my prospects. So you can package that in any way. You might not be hyper local. If a great example is Harry Duran. So Harry Duran, have you had Harry on the show? Do you know Harry?
No.
Okay, so Harry Duran has two podcasts. He started with Podcast Junkies because he has a podcast production company, and he has Vertical Farming Podcast. Now, I might butcher it. I'll just give you the bullet points because I'm not him. What he did when he launched Vertical Farming Podcast is it was a passion project. He knew nothing about vertical farming. He was there to learn. And that's one thing that I didn't touch on. If you're looking to learn, that might be your niche in itself, something that you're curious about. He wanted to learn vertical farming, and the pandemic closed down road shows. It closed down trade shows and big events. And he knew that it was $20,000 for a booth at a trade show event, at a roadshow event for these vertical farming kind of companies. He knew it was $20,000. So he scratched his head and he said, or I'm scratching my chin right now, but he scratched himself and said, okay, it's $20,000 for a booth for a 2-day event. What if I gave an entire season, I had them sponsor the podcast for half of that? And he's like, oh, we'll just lower it a little bit. And he charged $9,000 for a sponsor of a podcast that didn't exist yet. But do you know how he got that sponsor? wasn't his smile, it wasn't his charm. It was because it was a vertical farming podcast. It was so hyper niche, and he was so passionate about it that it would be easy for him to put this content out, that this third party sponsor was willing to put their chips on this podcast because they knew that 100% of the audience would be their target client. So he's probably a better example than me, but I guess let's look at what we did here. What are you interested in? What does your audience need? And how can you monetize that by being a small enough niche that people care? Because if I started a marketing podcast, no one would care. If I started a personal growth podcast, no one would care. I started a Rochester podcast, Rochester, New York, my city cared. Then once I had a foundation, then I rebranded. So I didn't start international. I started hyper niche. Then once I created a foundation, then I rebranded. And I've never actually talked about it that in depth, but I guess that's the formula for us.
Man, I think that's genius, because a lot of times, the niche process, like you do all your research, competitive research, market research,
I did
social
no research.
listening. Yeah, not all of that. And then you overcomplicate it. And then really what ends up happening is you come up with a niche that's the most logical, but not the most interesting to you personally. And if that's the case, it doesn't matter how logical it is, because it's a long-term play. It's not going to be super successful overnight. Even if you choose a very logical, hyper niche thing, you're still not going to find it interesting. So you're not going to do the work to make it happen. And honestly, you don't want it to happen, because the niche you chose bores the crap out of you. So I think your method of going with something that you are interested, even if you don't know anything about it. And I think that's a really important nuance, because the other thing that a lot of people do is say, like, what's your hobbies? Like, oh, that's your hobby, you should turn it into a business. And it's like, no, don't do that. That's already a passion of yours, and you're going to bastardize it to make some cash. Yeah, that's a bad idea. Unless your plan is to not make money off of it, and you just want to connect with the community, that's different. But if the goal is to make money, then yeah, go with something that you don't know that much about, but are interested in, because there's a couple factors. And I think what you said is genius for these reasons. Is the market that you're actually going after doesn't know anything about that subject either. And so you're able to connect with this other ignorant group on a really genuine level, because you don't know anything either. And so you're finding all this stuff out. When you learn something, you're very excited about it. Like, that resonates when you're doing a show or you're talking to people. And then now you're learning about it. Then you could always get more advanced, but your actual community is getting more advanced at the same time. And now you're all growing together, and it's a very organic process, versus something you know a ton about. And then you're going to have the advanced people on, and now you just disconnected from the bigger market, which is super ignorant, just like you are. So I think that's genius. And you said the entire formula in like a minute and a half. So kudos.
Not complicated. What's beautiful is you don't need a formula. Helps, but you don't need a formula, because the formula will create itself the more you do the thing. There's examples, I'm sure. I've never seen someone put up their first ad and become a millionaire. You beta test a few different things and you double down on what worked. So you try some stuff.
And you fail a bunch.
That's the best part sometimes. You gotta enjoy the failure.
Yeah, well, it's just a learning process, and people could see that, and I think you communicate that as well, because if you are, and I've known guys that were just instant successes, and then just went from success to success to success, and you're like, and they talk to you, and you're like, I want to flip you off, but it's not because you did anything wrong.
Yeah.
And people could sense that too. And then actually, what's funny is that the example I'll give, just because I don't know him, is what was that show? Quarterback. And you had Kaepernick. I'm probably butchering his name. I'm not actually a big football fan. But I
saw the one, Kaepernick,
that was it.
Okay, I didn't see that segment. I saw the recent one with like Mahomes and Cousins, but
no. It was Mahomes. That's who it was. It was Mahomes.
Patrick
and Mahomes is somebody who's an incredible football player, and he actually has a lot of discipline, and he coaches his team. He does a lot of things right, but a lot of times when you hear him talk, especially if he's talking to the media, it's just very formulaic. Thank God thank my family.
Yeah.
So, blessed to have this and blah, 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 blah. And it just feels like a formula because a lot of times he's just amazing. He's talented. His dad was talented. He's kind of, grown into this ultra star status, and it was just kind of automatic. And it's very inspirational from him because he does put in the work, and you could tell he cares a ton and he loves the game and all these good things, but he was also like gifted. And so it's harder to identify with somebody like that versus somebody else who wasn't as gifted and had to work really hard and had to have that passion and pursue and go. Like that's much more inspirational to somebody like me. And it's because of that fact that they weren't handed the situation. So, I think it's two different people. And if you can lean into a subject that you really like and are talented in, just know that it's going to be a disconnect from the majority of your audience, which is not experienced and is completely ignorant, just like you might be when you start. So I don't know where that leads to, but
I can quickly jump off on that. So if you want to be Patrick Mahomes or you're a failure, you're probably never going to even pick up a football. You're never going to be a personal trainer for football players. Like, you don't have to be the best on earth. You don't have to be a Gary V, Grant Cardone, Alex Hormozy. You don't have to be a Oprah or a Brene Brown to be a successful marketer and business person. So to compare ourselves to these icons that are oftentimes just built super different, I think is kind of silly.
And that's a great point too, because I think it's I mean, you think you have like this pay to play, right? Like I have to have this level of talent, I have to be this good at speaking, I have to be this blah 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 blah. And even for me personally, like I was never good on camera, and actually I hated talking. I grew up not talking, and I didn't realize it until I turned like 39 that I actually was saying nothing that I meant most of the time, because I had this shell that I had constructed, and that's why. And once I realized that, then I was like, oh my gosh, if I just say what I'm thinking all the time, people listen, and then they say what they're thinking. And then I had, now I have all these amazing connections now all the time. But it took that realization to realize that's what I was doing before I was able to start the process. So
can I ask you a question about that?
Sure.
Why do you feel like it took so long to break out of that shell?
You know what? There's a whole bunch of reasons. Some of it was, childhood trauma. Some of it was actually physical. What I realized was after I took a gut biome check that I'm super allergic to like a lot of things. And so essentially from the age of 15 to 39, I had like IBS, or just very uncomfortable gut situation where I was basically nauseous all the time. But I didn't realize it because I lived with it for 25 years. And then once I fixed it, I was like, oh my gosh, is this what normal people feel like all the time? And so I realized that was really impacting my behavior and, clouding everything else. And what a lot of people don't realize is that your second, highest nerve cluster in your body is in your gut. And so if you have an upset stomach, it will mentally impact how you feel and how you behave. So it was a combination of a spiritual journey and running a marathon and going to church and meditating and doing cold dips. And I have like a book of stuff that I tried. But yeah, that was the biggest impact. And so I just feeling bad all the time will really restrict your ability to connect with people. But if you can figure that out, then you could have what I have, which is a much more fulfilling life. And it only took me 39 years to figure out. That was it.
Well, hey, I'm happy you do. And this is relatable because a lot of marketers have that aching gut in their stomach. There's something in their business that feels misaligned, that isn't around like what actually lights them up and what helps people. It's just maybe a transactional thing that makes them money, but it like makes the entire staff miserable. Got to cut that baby out. This is too existential. These are the kind of talks I like to have, because we can talk strategy and tactics all day, but in my opinion, the reason some people succeed and others don't is actually the implementation of the strategy. And that takes a little bit of mindset sometimes.
Oh, it does. Well, it takes a feeling too, because, it's, a lot of the really successful people I've seen had no logical reason or plan for what they were doing, but they were very passionate about it. And that was enough to make everything else happen. Because if you have that passion and you don't have the ego that's associated with whatever you think success is, then you're able to ask for help from anybody, because you're open to receiving it to achieve whatever you're trying to get to. So, and the alternative is that you take these frameworks, and I could give you a framework and we could say, here's how to make a podcast. Step 1, decide on your niche. Step 2, make a brand name that is associated with keyword term, that blah, 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 blah. And yeah, it might be successful for you, but long term, even if you execute it really well, if it's not your passion, if you're not interested in the subject matter, if you're just doing it for money, then chances are it's not going to succeed. And even if it does, you're not going to like it anyways. So I do think this is all essential.
You won't be a thought leader. If it's not anything that you want to become a thought leader in, you're not going to become a thought leader, because people will, you'll have that. In sales, we call it commission breath, but you'll have that weird, needy energy that you're trying to be a thought leader in a space you don't even enjoy. Like, it's not going to work. It's not going to work.
Well, and at the end of the day, you don't want it to work. I think that's a big caveat. You're just doing it to make money. And at the end of the day, you know what you're doing. Even if you don't consciously acknowledge what you're saying, subconsciously, you're like, oh, I hate this. I hate this. I hate this. But money. And then it's like, and that's reflected in everything you do. One of the things I'm working on now is Carl Jung's shadow work. And so you have this basically what you're doing is looking at these aspects of yourself that you've probably repressed due to past trauma, and trying to bring them to the light and say, okay, why I'm acting this way? And the best way to identify these is just look for your triggers. If you're talking to somebody and they say something and instantly you're just like, you see red, you're just, oh man, what the hell? And that's the trigger. And so instead of reacting to that, what you need to do is self-observance and say, why was that a trigger? Why did that make me that upset? That was an unreasonable amount of upset. So figure it out. You know what? Back when I was a kid, there was this dad that was talking to me, and he just really made me feel bad about this exact situation. And so now as an adult, I react based on that past information. And I repressed that until now. Now I bring it to the light, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's because I don't like unjust things being said. And so if you say something unjust, I'm going back to that reaction. But now I acknowledge what I'm doing, so now I could react properly. And so now we're really deep into therapy.
It's powerful, man, because it directly correlates to marketing. So we'll just use an AI SaaS product that you just invented as an example. You might be like, why does nobody want this? Everybody needs this. This is the best thing ever. I created it and it helps everybody. I have all the data. It's like, you're kind of getting aggressive in the fact you need to sit back and be like, what does my audience that I'm trying to serve, what do they want? Are they not ready for this? Am I not communicating to them properly? Is the messaging coming from a place where I'm an AI nerd and they're late adopters? They don't know what the hell I'm talking about. So we're projecting our own self upon them, when oftentimes we just need to ask them, survey and serve, figure out what they want, what they need, how they speak, and then package it for them, rather than getting offended when they don't want what we have to offer. It's possible what we have to offer is never going to make it because we never listen to the people that need it.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like I was had, who was it yesterday? The 5 light bulbs, Billy Bross. And he was talking about, he has the 5 light bulbs of copywriting, but it applies to all marketing. And the 4th light bulb is the offer. The first light bulb is, where is your customer at? And until you can't just jump to the 4th light bulb. You have to go through, where's the customer at? What other solutions are there on the market? How is your solution actually unique to what you can offer? And then the offer, and then the after state. So the after state is looking at, like, we talk about the before and after grid at DigitalMarketer for, your customer avatar. Like, hey, well, before, this guy was miserable and he wasn't happy and his kids hated him and blah, 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 blah. And then after he got this service, he was enlightened and he was so happy and everybody loved him and blah, blah, blah. The before and after. But, the offer is really where most people start. Like, I have this awesome SaaS product. It does all these things that I know people need it to do and blah, 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 blah. But you haven't really acknowledged what the state of anybody is and what they actually want. And it's just that little tweak where it's just like, stop talking about the offer. Maybe you need to go farther back and realize that, here's what people are going through. And that's, this is all marketing 101, but it's very easy to forget. And so I think, just like with the podcast or, becoming a thought leader, you have to find out what your audience is actually going through before you could have a solution for them. Seems obvious.
There's a Bruce Lee quote. I'll butcher it. I'm thinking about it as I talk. But you said this is marketing 101. Bruce Lee says something. What's he say? He talks about fighting the person that's practiced the same kick 200,000 times. Like, if you understand the basics so good and you practice them on a daily business, you could be going against the most advanced marketer that forgot the location, the mindset, the position, the life of their audience, who just starts over talking and like, their products are great, but it's too complex. If you can study the basics and crush it and study it and do it 200,000 times, that's all you need to do. And then once you've got somebody, don't fight the person who has practiced a kick 2,000 times. Boom, baby. Or there's a couple versions in here in the chat box.
I like the 10,000 kicks once, or practice
the
one
same
kick.
That's the one. I knew you guys would come in and save me here. I'm like, Bruce Lee, but then I forgot the quote. But
it was relevant though.
The point here at the close of this point is, you bring someone in with the basics. They're new. They don't know you that well. Maybe they just started consuming your content. You bring them in, you retain them as a client, you provide a great customer experience. Then you can incrementally continue to upsell and add additional products that are more complex and serve them better and make your company more money. But you're opening with this complex product when you haven't actually gained their trust on the basic product yet.
No, and that's a genius way to look at it. Well, and just, to that point as well, you don't have one path. A lot of people think like, oh, okay, I do this and then I do this and then the customer gets this. And really, if you have a company is all about, the evolving solution that you're providing to your customer base. It's not about a solution. It's about the relationship you have with them so that they continue to buy. And I think, we've kind of lost that over the last 10 to 15 years because we've been so on demand with any product. We didn't care about the brand. We just said, hey, I need this thing right now, Amazon, send me whatever. I don't care. But nowadays where, money's tighter, we actually care about where the products come from. Because we want to know what they're made of. We want to know the motivations behind the owner of the business. We want to know why it was invented in the first place. It's the real information age, where if you can't supply these things, then you have a generic commodity that I could get from Amazon and it doesn't matter. And so I actually think it's a really good thing for marketers, especially because now your job's relevant again. You're no longer a technician that's pushing buttons and making sure that the thing is working. You are a solution provider, and your job is to provide solutions. And if you can't, or if you don't care about it, then, I'm not going to say I hope you fail, but you're probably going to.
Possibly. At the end of the day, it gives us an opportunity to lean into our creativity, which is so powerful as a marketer when technology has made life so easy for us. But it allows us to lean into creativity, lean into thought leadership, lean into our individualized story and impact we're looking to create for the people we get to help. And then we become better marketers. But if you lose that creative edge, if you lose the storytelling, if you lose the impact, if you sound generic, you said it, you're a commodity. And I'd hate to compete on price the rest of my career. It's a race to the bottom.
It is. And it's a shallow race. It's not anything that you're like, oh, my purpose is to be the cheapest. Now your purpose can be.
Elon is the best quality and the cheapest. So I don't know how he does it, but.
Well, no, I think you just make a system and you let inflation do whatever it's doing, but you stick to the plan you set because it was based on your purpose. And I think that's another thing that we've kind of got away from too, where, if you look at the how planning has worked in terms of business planning, because that's kind of what I went to school for. It was always long term, like what's the 5-year, what's the 10-year, what's the 10+ year. And nowadays and this is something that we teach, and there's nothing wrong with it, here at Digital Marketer, the sprint plan, 90 days. And then you expand it to the year, and then you expand it to the 3-year, and you push it out. And this is just because things have evolved or are evolving so fast with new technologies and new methodologies and, everything that we try to keep up with as marketers. But at the end of the day, if you have an underpinning of a purpose with a plan that you're executing long term, you're going to be way more successful because you don't get distracted by, the next fire or the next hurricane or the next horrible thing that happens or the next beneficial technology that fundamentally changes how you operate. It doesn't matter because your plan is a purpose and to serve your customer and to grow alongside them. You'll do fine. You'll do great. Way happier too.
Amen to that. It's my opinion as well. Sometimes I wonder if I'm in an echo chamber. If anyone disagrees, put it in the chat box. But I'm in agreement. You two are
crazy. Like, that won't be the first time. But the good thing is that there's tons of other marketers and thought leaders out there that have the complete opposite approach. And you could go 1,000% numbers, and you could go 1,000% analytical, judgment on all these different practices. I'm sorry, I'm like an artist. I'm like, I can't help it. I'm always going to default to that aspect of business because I think if we can incorporate, like you're saying, the relationship aspect to it, we don't have to feel shallow doing your job or going to the office or any of these things, because you do have to do the work. There's no getting out of some boring drudgery that is a part of your business. That's always going to happen. And you're never, and just accept it that you have to get that done. But in the meantime, again, if you have that underpinning of purpose that you can anchor yourself to, you'll succeed and you'll feel good doing it. And then when somebody comes to offer you $1 billion for your business, you could say no. Imagine that. And there was no exit plan,
I'm going to take the $1 billion and start something new.
That's the trick, but that's how we got stuck here.
Yeah.
Is the good people that made good companies get offered $1 billion. And how do you say no to $1 billion? You could always start another company. But one of the things I realized when I sold my company and came out here to Austin was that, like, man, all I do is start another business, why not just keep the one and keep making it better?
Well,
nothing wrong with that.
Julia McCoy is on the faculty, right?
Oh, no, she's not on the faculty.
Okay, but Julia is kind of like a mutual friend. She's brilliant, and she built an incredible company, sold it for over $1 million, and now she's partnered with. She's a content writer, a copywriter, blogger.
Oh no, she's the president of Content Scale now.
Correct. So she sold that company, and now she's the president at Content at Scale, which is more an AI-driven thing. But she sold her company, took the big bucks, she earned it, and then started a asymmetrical company in a similar industry so she can still continue to create. So she got the payday, but it doesn't mean she stopped creating. She just leveled up the room she was creating in.
Well, and the cool thing about Julia is she does have that consistent message. If you actually look at her, whether she's using humans to make the copy or she's using AI to make the copy, it's still about quality content generation. And that's really what she sells. And so I think that's she has a extended purpose that isn't limited by a specific brand, and that she's not so tied to that she's not willing to make decisions that are really difficult decisions, if it makes sense and is logical. Because she actually made that switch, because I remember talking about, because she was at our December event and she gave a speech about how AI can never be better than human copywriting. And then because of that one presentation, Content at Scale reached out to her to show her their product, and then she shut down that company because she's like, well, AI is better, and now she's the president of that company. So I was like, that's living bold, right? And that's a personal preference. And there's nothing wrong with that methodology either. I think it's, at the end of the day, it's like you have to invent your own, and that's the thing that most companies don't tell you, because they're like, no, you don't have to invent your own. Use our formula, or use our system, or use our framework, or whatever it is. But even here at Digital Marketer, we say like, hey, customer value journey, 8-stage process. We use it for doing all this stuff. However, do whatever you want. It's your business, figure it out, and pursue that kind of knowledge within how you work your own process. And then you'll have something brand new, and you can grow as much as you want and be entertained at the same time, which is a key factor with success as far as I'm concerned, because, if you really want to be successful, where successful is whatever you define it as, then you have to be genuine with yourself, because, for me personally, like, no amount of money is going to make me feel successful. It just doesn't matter. Successful to me is, am I contributing something to the greater community that I'm part of? Okay, I am. Oh, all right. Well, I'm doing good. Whatever. So find your purpose.
Doesn't hurt though.
Figure it out.
The money doesn't hurt.
Money never hurt.
When you can do both.
I need air and food too,
Right. Air's pretty easy to come by.
Yeah, right now. Well, thank you so much, Ben. I think this has been an enlightening talk. I hope everybody else enjoyed it as much as I did, because I think it's, we get into tactics and the technical aspects all the time, but I think it is good to look at that, observe the relationship process, the, organic kind of growth process, and really the interaction between what your business is and how you personally feel. And that's, if you can combine those two, you don't have to work a day in your life. That's what they say. So thank you so much. Where can people learn more about you and what you do?
Yes, sir. Depending on where you see this, you can find Real Business Connections wherever you found it. So just type Real Business Connections in the browser. Type Real Business Connections into Google. But if you haven't left a comment, a heart, a review, is this on Apple and all those things as well?
This one we put on
this is
YouTube.
Private.
Yeah, we'll post the replay on YouTube, and then Cameron, you want to explain the rest?
Well, my short version is the barrier to entry to connect with me is to comment or connect or leave a review on this first, and then you can find me just by typing in Real Business Connections.
Fantastic. And we are building out your page, your faculty page at digitalmarketer.com, where you could see more about Ben. He's actually, I think you've been on the podcast a couple of times now.
You've been on mine one, I've been on yours one. And then we have one scheduled for something different. You mentioned a December event last year. Do you have a December event this year?
I think we are doing the M3 event in December. That'll be December 5th, 6th. I want to say, and then cool. TNC is in January. So TNC will be in Las Vegas. I'll be speaking this year, which is exciting because I've haven't spoken at TNC before, and it should be a really big event where we're kind of, this is going to be the relaunch of Digital Marketer as part of or a bigger part of TNC, which should make it lots of fun, because you'll see lots of colorful gears. We had talked about giving away a car, but I'm not 100% on that.
Really?
Stay tuned. And we'll be, well, it was M3, so we were going to give away a M3 just because obvious marketing connection. But again,
I'll be there. Mark will be there. Will Cam be there?
Cam will be there.
We're
going to be podcasting. We'll be busy.
Go.
Can't give away my Tesla. You're crazy, Nick.
You have a Tesla? Beautiful.
Teslas. It's not me, though. It's my wife. Well, I was an investor. We were original investors in Tesla, so we have connections.
Oh, love that. What else?
Investment? Oh, I got some tips there, but
I just noticed we're still recording. It's like we're starting a whole new show on Tesla.
That's true. No, I have stories. Yeah, it's been a process, but it's it paid for my house. That was the good part.
Beautiful.
Yes. And we have, you stay out there, you invest in what you're interested in, and sometimes it pays off a lot. And that's always a good thing.
Sounds like everyone gets a car at the TNC Summit.
Yes.
You get a car. You get a car. Everybody gets a car. Teslas.
They're leases.
You get a lease for 12 days and then you have
For
to buy
12
it.
days. Everyone gets to share the same car for one spot. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. Thanks again, Ben. This has been a ton of fun. If you are a marketer, we're always looking for people to interview, become future staff members. And it all kind of starts with getting on the podcast and just getting involved with the community. So if you do want to be on here talking about what you're doing, make comments on our stuff on social, subscribe to the magazine, attend a live cohort or a free webinar. We do this kind of stuff all the time. So the more involved you get, the more that will appreciate your involvement and hopefully promote your stuff in the future. So tune in next time. We'll be back at 11 next Friday and with our guest, Cameron. I always forget to mention the guest.
Yes, I put it in the chat, but next Friday
Oh,
we
for
have
Winfrey.
no, we have Shanna Lynn, and she will be talking through how to leverage community-focused retention strategies to keep your customers longer. So
Fantastic.
join us for next week.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. Have a good weekend. Try to relax, find your passion, all that fun stuff.